I remember sitting out on them evenings. The world was full of opportunity. I must have been 23, back in my hometown, after university, in my own flat. It's funny looking back now. Potentially that, the start of my adult life was my peak, in a materialistic way of looking at the world. The way you're supposed to play the game. If I'd had a car, everybody would have probably thought, gee, Daniel's doing just fine. But this game of keeping up appearances, it's never really appealed to me. The biggest loser is you. You just look like you're winning. No, what matters to me was on the inside. How you feel. Since then, it's been many beers, friends, laughs, and travelling. I haven't amassed much, financially. My personal bank is full of memories, not numbers. To me, them numbers just represent unrealised opportunity and fun. Anyway, me in the flat, on that summer's evening, sat on a little bit of communal grass on a garden chair, drinking a beer and reading a book. I believe it was I Am Legend, with the river just out in front of me, and the French doors open behind me, to the little flat I lived in, alone. I remember contemplating the simplicity of life. Did a man need much more than this? The textbook would say a wife. I put my book on my lap and tipped back the Indian lager, feeling the warm summer's breeze on my neck, sighing. Because, though the sky was beautiful, turning purple just beyond the river, above the yellow fields of the next county, the light was yielding to the night. I got up from my fold-away chair and carried everything into the flat. And that's when I heard the dishes piled up on the draining board move. The kitchen was in the same space as the living room, and as I peered towards the sink, a pair of curious eyes were looking at me. And then she called out. She jumped off the worktop, ran over to my legs, and head-butted my shin, considerably hard, with a second hello. I put down the chair and book, and sat on the sofa. There was no introduction. Apparently, we were already friends, and she jumped up, put her paws on my lap, and head-butted my chin. She began to purr. It was loud, and I could now smell the tuna I had eaten with a sweet potato an hour earlier. It was on her whiskers. She looked at me with eyes half closed, and I could swear she was smiling. I sat with that cat, on the sofa, sipping my beer, as the room turned from blue to black, with the door open and the summer night's breeze entering the silent room, but only for her gentle purr. I scratched the back of her ears, and at about 11, when I could see the silver half-moon in the glass of the open French door, she got up suddenly and shot out the door and into the night. I closed the door, locked it, and got into bed. The next night, my friends were around, 2 of them. That's how it was on Fridays, me being the only one with their own place. Cold beer dripped down our necks as we watched some film and laughed about the stupid stuff we did at school. Hey, what's that cat doing? We all looked towards the French door, and there she was, sat very patiently, staring at us. My 2 friends laughed, her confidence evident in her stillness. Let her in then, I said to my friend who was closest to the door. How do you know it's a she? Well, she hasn't got any balls. What? How do you know? Didn't see any last night. Oh, aye. Late night pussy, is it? Just let her in. She's sound. She's sound? She's not a person. My 2 mates laughed. He stood up, unlocked the door with the key, and she jumped in. She looked up at my friend and gave it a meow. He looked down at her with his cider. He always had cider, and said, "All right." We all laughed. Then, like he'd embarrassed her or something, she looked at his feet, and her paw came out, inquisitively, with a slight claw. "What's she doing?" said my friend, moving his feet away, which made her claw again, but this time with more ferocity. "What's she doing?" said my friend, jumping away as she chased his feet, clawing at them. He ran into the kitchen, but there was barely anywhere to go, as me and my other friend began to laugh and cry. All of a sudden, from behind us, his body came crashing over the sofa, making us spill our beers. He took refuge where we sat, and she came jogging around to the front of the sofa. Instinctively, we brought our feet up, and she sat there and stared at us. Our friend tangled up as he manoeuvred himself around to sit properly. We were speechless, and then she gave a... She then turned, jumped on the other sofa, and laid down. She sprawled out and began to purr. We were dumbstruck. "Get me a beer," I said to my friend. "You get one." We all laughed. "Who does she think she is? This is ridiculous. Go get her off," said one of my friends. I stood up. Her eyes went straight to the floor, looking at my feet. "Nope," I said, sneaking away towards the fridge. Her eyes were glued to my feet, and her tail hit the sofa hard. She was purring, but somehow she didn't seem her usual friendly self. I got 2 beers and a cider from the fridge, and climbed back over the sofa for refuge. We sat there all night, a third watching the film, a third watching her, and a third in conversation. When it got to midnight and the horror film finished, my friends climbed over the back of the sofa and said good night. I saw them to the door, and when I came back into the living room, after locking up, she was sat there, sitting where I had been sat. She seemed happier now, smiling, and she said hello. I turned off the TV and sat beside her, and in the dark she sat on my lap, purring, as I scratched behind her ears. I drank another couple beers, and we shared a tin of tuna, mine in a sandwich, hers out the tin. And at about 2 a.m, she went to the French door and looked up at the handle. I said good night and opened the door, and she ran off into the night. I then locked the door and went to bed. The next day was long. I had a hangover, and I left the French door open all day, watching tennis but not really. I told myself the door was open just because it was hot, and I kept looking towards the door, but nothing. And it became night, and when it was fully dark and the moon could be seen in that French door window, I turned off the TV and sat in the stillness, listening to the night. I gave in the early hours of the morning, closing that door, locking it, and going to bed, listening to the silence of my flat.